Hello everyone and welcome back to Dr. Creepy. In tonight's episode, we're heading deep into 8 most disturbing true Pennsylvania small-town horror stories. Unsettling accounts from forgotten main streets, aging neighborhoods, and quiet towns tucked between forests and hills where help is far away and something always feels off after dark. From streets that empty too quickly at night, to houses with lights on but nobody home, to towns where locals warn you not to stop, not to ask questions, and never stay past sundown. These encounters happen in places that look ordinary in daylight, but feel deeply wrong once the sun goes down. If you're new here, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss a new true horror stories. Now get comfortable, and let's start. I grew up hearing stories about the old coal breaker on the edge of town, how it was cursed, how people saw lights inside long after it shut down, how miners who died in the collapse still walked the halls. My grandfather used to say that the breaker was the only place in Pennsylvania where the shadows fell the wrong way. As a kid, I thought he was just trying to scare me. As an adult, I wish I had listened. I was 28 when I moved back home after losing my job. The town hadn't changed much, but it felt heavier, like the air itself had aged. Houses sat a little darker, streets felt too quiet, but the coal breaker, that tower of rusted metal and broken windows, looked exactly like it did when I was a kid. My mom told me not to go near it. She said people had been seeing someone around the property again, a man, wandering at dusk, always staring toward the entrance. Every time someone got close, he would vanish. I thought she meant drug addicts or trespassers, but she insisted it wasn't that. She said the man wore old mining gear, with a cracked helmet and a coat covered in coal dust, clothes that hadn't been worn since the 80s. The same clothes worn by the men who died in the collapse. I didn't believe her, until the night I saw him myself. It was early October, one of those evenings when the sky hangs low and orange like it's pressing down on the earth. I was walking home from the store, cutting through the back road like I always did, when I saw a figure standing near the fenced-off yard of the breaker. At first I thought it was just some guy looking for scrap, but the longer I stared, the more I realized there was something wrong with the way he stood. Too still, too quiet, like he was listening for something underground. His helmet was tilted forward, but I could make out the cracked glass on the front. His clothes were old, like museum piece old, and covered in soot. Not dirt, not mud, soot. When I looked away for half a second, just to blink, he was suddenly gone. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he stepped behind one of the beams, maybe he heard me coming and left. But the yard was empty, open except for a few scraps of metal. There was nowhere for someone to hide. I walked home faster than I ever had in my life. For a few days I tried to ignore it. Tried to convince myself I imagined the whole thing. The breaker had always scared me. Maybe my mind just filled in the blanks. But then I overheard 2 guys talking at the gas station about a trucker who said a man flagged him down on Route 11. A man wearing a miner's coat. A man whose face was covered in black soot, except for 2 wide, bright eyes that stared like he'd just seen daylight for the first time. The trucker picked him up. The man didn't talk, just pointed toward the old mine road, the one that led straight to the breaker. When the trucker made a turn away from it, the man finally spoke. Wrong way. The trucker blinked, and the passenger seat was empty. The door never opened. The truck never stopped. But coal dust covered the seat. Someone else said the man's name, Elias Ward, one of the miners who died in the collapse 30 years ago, or at least the one whose body was never found. I didn't want to believe it, but curiosity has a way of dragging people into places they shouldn't be. And for me, curiosity has always beaten fear. Which is how I ended up at the coal breaker again. It was late, around 9 p.m., and the sky was covered in thick clouds, the kind that make the night feel heavier. I brought a flashlight, but the beam barely cut through the darkness. The breaker looked like a giant skeleton, ribs of rusted steel sticking up into the sky. The air smelled like old machinery and wet earth. I walked the fence line, trying to see the spot where I saw him before. Nothing, just wind and silence. Then, crunching, footsteps, slow, measured, coming from inside the yard. I swung the flashlight toward the sound. Between two broken support beams stood the same man. Same cracked helmet, same coal-covered coat, same stillness. His head tilted up slightly, and though I couldn't make out his face clearly, I could see two pale eyes staring through the grime. Eyes that glowed slightly in the beam. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. Every instinct told me to run, but something about the way he stared held me in place. He lifted one hand, not like a wave, not like a warning, more like he was pointing, toward the entrance of the breaker. I backed away slowly. My legs felt like rubber. When I blinked, he was suddenly only a few feet from the fence. Closer, too close. His movements didn't look natural anymore, not smooth, not human, more like he was being pulled forward by invisible strings. Then, the most horrifying part, I realized he wasn't breathing, not even a little. I ran home without looking back. The next morning, I tried to shake it off, but the image of his eyes stayed burned in my mind. I couldn't eat, couldn't focus, couldn't sleep. So I did what fearful, stupid people do. I went looking for answers. My grandfather was the last living miner who survived the collapse. So I went to the nursing home where he lived. He was frail, but his mind was sharp. When I mentioned the coal breaker, he tensed. When I mentioned seeing a man near it, he grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "What did he look like?" he demanded. I told him. His face went pale. His hand trembled. "You listen to me," he whispered. "That man ain't walking. That man ain't breathing. Elias Ward died down there, but he didn't go alone. Something else was in that mine with us, something that moved in the tunnels, something that wasn't a man." I stared at him, thinking he must be confused, but he squeezed my arm harder. "You think the mountain took 32 men? You think it just collapsed? No. Something came out of the lower tunnels, something old, something hungry. We blocked the shaft to trap it down there. Elias went back to save 2 others. He never came out." He leaned closer. "And now it's unblocked." I felt sick. Cold, like the air had been sucked out of the room. "That thing wears him," he whispered. "Like a coat, like a mask. Don't you understand? Whatever you saw, it isn't Elias." The worst part was that he wasn't trying to scare me. He looked genuinely terrified. That night, I couldn't stop replaying his words. Something in the tunnels, something old, something that wears the dead. The idea clawed its way into my mind and wouldn't leave. And then the knocking started. At 2:13 a.m., 3 knocks, slow, heavy. At my front door, I froze in bed. My heart pounded so hard it shook my ribs. I didn't get up at first. I just stared at the ceiling, hoping it was a dream. 3 more knocks. I sat up, drenched in sweat. I crept to the window beside the door and pulled the curtain back an inch. He was standing on my porch, helmet cracked, coat dark with soot, staring at my door like he could see through it, like he knew I was right there. His head twitched. A small jerk, too sharp, too sudden, not human. Then he slowly looked up toward the window, straight at me. His eyes glowed. I stumbled back, knocking over a chair. When I looked again, he was gone. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I tried to leave town the next morning. I packed a bag, got in my car, and headed toward the highway. But as I pulled onto the road, a figure stepped out from behind a telephone pole. Him. He stood in the middle of the road, forcing me to swerve. My car spun into the ditch. When I looked up, he was standing right beside the passenger window, his face inches away from the glass. His eyes were wide, unblinking, too bright, and then his hand pressed against the window. The glass began to frost under his palm. I scrambled out of the driver's side door and ran. I didn't look back until I reached the edge of town. When I finally turned around, he was gone, but a trail of coal dust stretched along the road toward the ditch. I couldn't run anymore. I couldn't hide. I did the only thing that made sense in a moment of desperation. I went back to the coal breaker. If something wanted me there, I needed to see why. The air inside the building was colder than outside. My flashlight flickered constantly. Every step echoed like the building itself was breathing. The deeper I went, the stranger the sounds became. Dripping water, chains clinking, distant scraping. The tunnels under the breaker had been sealed decades ago. But as I reached the far wall, I saw something that froze me in place. The concrete slab covering the entrance to the lower mines was cracked. Not like it aged, like something pushed it outward. A faint breeze rolled out of the crack. Cold, wet. It smelled like soil and rot and something else. Something metallic and sour. Something dead. And from deep inside the tunnel, I heard it. Footsteps, slow, dragging, accompanied by soft, wheezing breaths, then a scraping sound like nails or bone dragging across rock. I stepped back. Something moved in the darkness behind the crack. Not a person. Too tall, too thin. Its limbs scraped the stone as it squeezed closer to the opening, and over its bony shoulder hung the miner's coat. A hollow voice whispered from inside the tunnel. Wrong way. I ran. I didn't look back. I didn't stop. I didn't breathe until I reached my front porch. And when I finally dared to look out toward the breaker, I saw a faint orange glow inside, like lantern light swaying back and forth. It still glows sometimes. The town still hears things beneath the ground. Coal dust still appears on porches. People still see a miner walking the edge of the breaker at dusk. But none of us go near it anymore. Because whatever came out of that mine 30 years ago is awake again. And it's wearing a new body now. I think it's looking for another. And every night, just after sunset, I hear footsteps outside my window. Slow, measured, getting a little closer each time. I never believed those old Appalachian-style Pennsylvania ghost stories about haunted mountain roads. People in my town exaggerate everything, from black bears the size of trucks to abandoned barns that cry at night. So when I first heard about the mountain road outside Jim Thorpe, I laughed it off. They called it the Ridge Line, an old, twisting stretch of asphalt that cut between rocky cliffs and thick pines. A pretty road during the day and a nightmare for inexperienced drivers at night. The story was simple. When the fog rolls in, the road gives you an extra passenger. Not a spirit, not a ghost. An actual person sitting in your back seat. Someone who shouldn't be there. Someone who disappears the moment you look away. I didn't believe it, but curiosity has always been my worst trait. I drive for work, mostly late-night deliveries between small PA towns. So I ended up on that road more often than I wanted to admit. Nothing strange ever happened, which only made the stories sound dumber. But then came the night that changed everything. It was early November, cold enough that the air stung your face, but not quite winter yet. The kind of night where fog clings low to the ground like it's alive. I had to deliver a package to a cabin about 10 miles past Jim Thorpe, which meant I had to take the ridge line after dark. The fog was already pooling thickly along the tree line when I started the climb up the mountain. Pines blurred together like black walls on either side of the road. The beam of my headlights cut through the mist, but only barely. Everything outside the car felt muted, like the world had been padded with cotton. Halfway up the mountain, the fog thickened so fast it felt like driving into a wall. I slowed to 20 miles per hour. The asphalt beneath me almost looked wet, but when I rolled down the window and touched the road, it felt dry. The silence inside the car felt heavy, almost pressurized. My ears had begun to ring. When I started driving again, I heard something, soft, brief, like the faintest thump against the back door. I froze. It wasn't a loud noise. Not like someone knocking, not like something hitting the car. It was more like the sound a person makes when they sit down suddenly. A shift of weight, a soft bump, a tiny rustle of fabric. I told myself it was the fog messing with my head. Maybe a branch fell. Maybe I ran over a pine cone. But then I looked in the rearview mirror. Someone was sitting in my back seat, not slouched or hiding, sitting upright, perfectly still, like they had been there the whole time. My chest seized. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The face was shadowed, just a faint outline in the low light reflecting from the dashboard, but I could see enough to know it wasn't a reflection. It wasn't a trick of the fog. It was a person. Short hair, thin frame, head tilted slightly to the side, eyes open. I turned around instinctively, too terrified to think, and the back seat was empty, completely empty. I whipped my head back to the rearview mirror. He was still there. Same outline, same posture, same head tilt. I slammed the brakes. The fog swallowed the road behind me as the car screeched to a halt. My heartbeat thudded painfully in my throat. I turned around again. Nothing. Just my empty back seat. I reached forward, grabbed my phone, and turned the flashlight on. When I twisted around once more, lighting up the back seat directly, still nothing. I was shaking so hard I nearly dropped my phone. The fog outside pressed against the windows like thick smoke. I wanted to leave. I wanted to drive out of there so badly that my hands trembled on the wheel. But something made me look into the mirror one more time. he was closer. Not in the seat anymore, not sitting upright. His face was pressed against the headrest directly behind me. I couldn't see details, just the shape of a nose, the indentations where his eyes were, the faint outline of lips slightly parted. But it was close enough that if he had leaned forward half an inch, he could have whispered into my ear. I screamed and shoved myself against the door. The instinct to escape, to get out, to abandon the car altogether, every thought collided into panic. But some part of me knew leaving the car in the middle of the ridgeline fog might be worse. So I did the only thing that made sense. I drove. I didn't care how fast. I didn't care if the fog swallowed the road. I kept my eyes on the asphalt and refused to look at the mirror. But the problem with fear is that it drags your eyes where they shouldn't go. Halfway down the mountain, I looked. He wasn't behind me anymore. The back seat was empty in the mirror. I almost cried from relief, until I saw movement in my peripheral vision. Something shifted in the passenger seat beside me. I turned my head slowly, afraid of what I'd see. At first, I thought the fog was playing tricks again, but then I saw the outline of a face pressed against the window glass. A face on the outside. Someone was hanging onto the side of my car. I heard the scraping of metal as their fingers clawed for grip along the seam of the door. The sound vibrated through the frame. I felt the car wobble slightly under the weight. I sped up. The fog whipped past in white streaks. I could barely see the road anymore, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away. The scraping sound grew louder, longer, nails dragging across metal. Something hit the rear window, once, hard enough to crack the glass. I felt the car fishtail from the sudden weight shift. I gripped the steering wheel with both hands and corrected, breath hitching, heart hammering so violently I thought it would burst. Then silence. The weight vanished. The scraping stopped. I didn't slow down, not until the fog thinned and the first cabin porch light came into view. When the road widened and the trees thinned, I finally pulled into a gravel turnout and collapsed against the wheel. My vision blurred from panic. I forced myself to check the back seat in the mirror. Empty. I turned around. Empty. I exhaled so hard I nearly sobbed. I turned on the dome light and examined the back seat in detail. Nothing. No footprints. No disturbed upholstery. But when I looked at the rear window from the outside, I felt the blood drain from my body. Something had scratched it. Deep grooves carved into the glass, 4 of them, straight down like finger marks. I drove home that night without stopping. I called my boss and told him I wasn't making the delivery. I didn't sleep, not even when the sun came up. When I returned to the car in daylight, the scratches were still there. But the strangest part was the thin smear of condensation on the inside of the window, as if someone had breathed on the glass from the back seat. I tried to forget it, pretend it was exhaustion, hallucination, stress. But the ridgeline didn't forget me. 2 nights later, I found something else. I went outside to grab my phone charger from the car. When I opened the door, something slid off the passenger seat and hit the ground with a soft thud. A damp cloth, dark gray, covered in tiny specks. I picked it up. Coal dust. I dropped it instantly. That night I barely slept, convinced I'd hear something knock on my window again. But the night was silent. Too silent. Around 4 a.m., my phone buzzed on the nightstand. A notification popped up. Unknown device connected via Bluetooth. I frowned, confused. I didn't have Bluetooth turned on. I opened the notification. Device name backseat. I dropped the phone. My heart dropped with it. In the silence of my bedroom, I heard footsteps pass by my window. Slow, dragging, like someone pacing along the siding. I stayed still, too afraid to breathe. The next day, I booked a hotel in another town for the weekend. I needed to escape, even if just temporarily. I drove out of town using the long route, avoiding the ridgeline entirely. Halfway to the hotel, my rearview mirror dimmed automatically from the glare of headlights behind me. A motion sensor in the mirror detects movement. It shouldn't activate unless something is shifting in the back seat. The mirror dimmed. I froze. Someone moved behind me. I turned around slowly, terrified. The back seat was empty. I breathed out, but then I blinked. For a fraction of a second, in the mirror's reflection, I saw the faint outline of a head leaning forward from the darkness in the corner. Eyes open, watching me. When I spun around again, the seat was empty. I pulled over on the side of the highway, heart pounding. Cars roared past in blurs of white light, but inside my car there was only silence. I leaned my head against the wheel, trying to steady my breathing. That's when I heard it. A whisper, so faint I would have thought it was wind, except it came from directly behind my ear. Next stop. I didn't drive the rest of the day. I called an Uber to the hotel and left my car on the shoulder. I didn't want to be inside it. I didn't want to feel that presence again. When I came back in daylight, the car seemed normal. No scratches, no condensation, nothing disturbed. But when I opened the back door, something lay on the floor behind the driver's seat. A belt buckle, old, rusted. With the initials JW, I looked up the initials when I got home. A teenage boy named Jacob Jake Wallace disappeared on that road in 1998. Last seen walking along the ridgeline in the fog. His body was never found, only his jacket and his belt buckle. Now the police have my car in their possession. They're examining the buckle, though they won't tell me anything. The officer who took the report looked at me strangely when I handed it over, like he didn't believe a word I said but didn't want to admit it. He told me not to drive the ridgeline again, not because of the fog, not because of the accidents, but because sometimes, when people see something in that back seat, they don't make it off the mountain. I haven't driven in weeks. But last night, when I took out the trash, I saw something that made my knees buckle. A silhouette in the back seat of my car. Sitting still, head tilted, watching the house, and when I blinked, it was gone. But the passenger door swung open slowly on its own, as if someone had just stepped out. And the fog that never comes this far down the valley, rolled in across my yard, curling around the car like fingers. I'm not going outside today, because whatever walked off that mountain road with me is still looking for a ride. I always thought the weirdest thing about our Pennsylvania town was how early everything closed. By 8 o'clock, the streets were empty, the shops dark, and the silence so complete it felt unnatural. But there was one exception, one house on the hill overlooking the valley from just beyond the tree line. It never went dark, even during storms, even during power outages. Even when the rest of the town was swallowed in black, that one house glowed. A soft, yellow-orange light poured from every window, like someone inside was hosting a quiet family dinner every night of the week. But the house had been empty since 1994. A fire gutted the interior, killed the family inside, and left the place abandoned for decades. The structure was still standing, though heavily damaged. Charred beams, crumbling walls, roof sagging like a broken spine. Kids dared each other to climb the porch steps, but no one stayed long. Because the house wasn't just abandoned, it felt wrong. The light was the main thing. People who lived near it said the glow never flickered, never dimmed, never changed color. Always that same steady, warm light, like an old oil lamp burning behind the curtains. My friend Jen once called it the house that refuses to die. I never cared enough to investigate, until the night the power went out across the entire region. It was mid-January when it happened, a brutal winter night with temperatures dipping below zero, heavy snow, thick enough to blanket everything in white silence. The outage hit around 11 p.m. My house went dead. Heat, lights, TV, everything. The only illumination in the entire valley came from one place, the house on the hill. It glowed brighter than ever, like it was the only thing in the world still breathing. I stood at my window staring at it, shivering in the cold. The warmth of that glow almost felt comforting, almost, until I realized it wasn't shining out of the house, it was shining through it. The light was so bright I could see through the fractured beams, through the broken windows, through the hollow interior, and someone moved inside. A silhouette, slow, gliding back and forth behind one window. I told myself it was a trick of the snow, my eyes playing games. Stress, exhaustion, anything but a figure walking inside a house that was 60% burnt to nothing. Then the silhouette stopped moving and slowly turned toward me. I stepped back from the window. My heart hammered. I closed the curtain, but I felt the weight of its gaze pressing through the fabric, like it knew exactly where I was standing. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor across the street. "Who's seeing that?" I typed back, "Yeah, someone's in there." He didn't reply, but a second later the house flickered, not like electricity returning, not like a bulb dying, It flickered like a candle in the wind, just for a heartbeat, then strengthened again. I decided I had to check it out. Call it stupidity or curiosity, but the thought of that silhouette standing alone in a dead house during a massive blackout felt too eerie to ignore. Maybe it was a squatter, maybe a homeless person trying to escape the cold, maybe someone in trouble, or maybe it was something else. I bundled up and stepped outside. The snow crunched loudly beneath my boots. The entire street was pitch black, except for that house, a glowing beacon at the top of the hill. As I walked, the air grew colder, not winter cold, something deeper, something like the temperature dropped 10 degrees with every step, the kind of cold you feel in your teeth. When I reached the bottom of the hill, the light changed again. It got warmer, almost too warm, like stepping close to a fire. But here's the part that made my stomach twist. There was no heat. The light looked warm, but the air around me was freezing. The snow didn't melt near the house. It stayed crisp and untouched, even just a few feet from the porch. I climbed the rotting wooden steps. They groaned under my weight but held. The front door was half open, slowly swinging forward and back as if breathing. Inside, the glow was stronger, yellow-orange, pulsating faintly with the rhythm of a heartbeat. The walls, though charred black, reflected the light as if covered in gold. I called out, "Hello? Is anyone there? You need help?" My voice echoed unnaturally, not like sound bouncing off walls, more like something repeating it softly, 1/2 second behind me. "Hello? Is anyone there? You need help?" My breath hitched. I stepped inside. The floorboards bent beneath my boots. Soot puffed into the air. The glow came from deeper inside the house, from the living room, where the fire started 30 years ago. I pushed forward. My flashlight flickered. Something moved in the corner of my vision, just a streak of shadow. When I reached the living room entrance, I froze. There were people inside, 3 of them, sitting around a wooden table, hands folded neatly, bodies stiff. A man, a woman, a young girl, all facing me. Their faces were blackened, cracked, charred beyond recognition. Burnt mannequins posed like a family welcoming me home, and their eyes were open, wide, unblinking, reflecting the light like glass. The glow didn't come from the lamps, it came from them. Their skin pulsed faintly, glowing from within, as if something inside their bodies was burning gently just beneath the surface. I wanted to scream, I wanted to run, but my legs locked, and all I could do was stare. The girl tilted her head slowly, too smoothly, like a puppet on strings. The woman's jaw opened a fraction, and a whisper seeped out, dry and crackling, like embers shifting in a dead fire. "Cold, tonight." Her voice wasn't coming from her mouth. It felt like it came from the walls, the ceiling, the air itself vibrating with each word. The man stood, and the glow inside him intensified, brightening until cracks in his burnt skin split wider, revealing something like molten light swirling beneath. He took a step toward me, then another. Each movement made the house tremble, boards groaning beneath him, dust falling like ash. I staggered back. My heart slammed against my ribs. My fingers shook uncontrollably. The woman rose next, then the girl. They moved slowly but relentlessly, like gravity pulled them forward. Their glowing eyes locked on mine, unblinking. I stumbled into the hallway. The house moaned loudly, like the whole structure resented my presence. The light behind me brightened. Shadows stretched in front of me. Something whispered in my ear, so close it felt like breath. "Stay," I ran. The front door slammed shut before I reached it. Not by wind. Something pushed it, hard. Boots pounding on the floor behind me. I lunged toward a window and threw my shoulder into it. Glass shattered. Cold air rushed in. I dove through, hitting the snow hard. My hands and knees scraped against ice, but I didn't stop. Behind me, the house glowed violently, bright enough to cast long, sharp shadows across the snow. I scrambled to my feet and sprinted down the hill. When I finally reached the street, I dared to look back. 3 silhouettes stood in the shattered window, watching. Still. Light pouring out of their bodies like they were lanterns turned up to full brightness. Then, every light went out. The house returned to complete darkness. A dead, abandoned ruin once more. No glow, no figures, nothing but broken windows and a collapsed roof. Seconds later, the power in the rest of the town flickered back on. My phone vibrated. A text from Jen flashed across the screen. "Dude, you near your house? The lights are back." I didn't answer. I went home and locked every door, every window, every curtain. I sat in the corner of my room until sunrise, waiting for something to move in the shadows. Nothing happened. But when morning finally came, I looked up at the hill. The house was dark, dead, but footprints, charred, blackened footprints, led down the hill, across the snow, toward my street, toward my front yard. They stopped halfway up my steps, just 1 foot away from my front door, and in the daylight, I could see clearly what each footprint was filled with. Ash, glowing faintly, still warm, like someone burning from the inside had walked right up to my home before deciding to stop for now. I haven't slept since. I keep expecting to see a warm glow through my curtains, a glow that doesn't belong, a glow that moves. The house hasn't lit up again, but the footprints never melted, not even when the weather warmed. The ash never blew away. Every day, they look a little fresher. And at night, sometimes, I hear footsteps climbing my porch, slow, warm, crackling, and I swear, sometimes the air smells like smoke. I grew up in Lancaster County, surrounded by cornfields, farmhouses, and more covered bridges than any other place in Pennsylvania. Most of them were quiet, peaceful, tourist attractions, places where teenagers carved their names or took cutesy fall photos. But there was one bridge nobody treated like that. It sat on a narrow back road between 2 sprawling Amish farms. Locals called it the Quiet Bridge. Not for sentimental reasons, because something in that tunnel of wood and shadow made people silent. Even the most talkative neighbors fell quiet when they drove through it. Kids stopped giggling. Radios turned off. It was an instinct more than a rule. Everyone said the same thing. Don't stop your car under the Quiet Bridge. If you asked why, people never gave a real answer. Just vague warnings. Bad luck. Don't mess with it. You'll hear things you don't want to hear. But nobody mentioned what I heard that night. Not until I told someone. And that's when I found out there was a reason they kept quiet. It started on a warm September evening, the kind where the air feels too still, like nature is holding its breath. My girlfriend at the time, Emily, asked me to drive her home after a late shift. Her parents' place was on the other side of the Quiet Bridge. We'd driven that way countless times without incident. But that night, we left town later than usual, close to midnight. The road was empty. The moon was high, pale, and thin like a sharpened fingernail. The corn on either side of the road swayed softly, even though there was no breeze. As we approached the bridge, the headlights washed over the weathered wooden structure. Something about it felt off. I had passed it thousands of times, but that night the opening looked darker, almost hollow. The first thing that hit me was the temperature drop. The moment our front bumper crossed inside the bridge, the car felt like it had been plunged into cold water. The air conditioner wasn't even on. Emily rubbed her arms and pulled her jacket tighter. "This is colder than usual," she whispered. Whispered. Not spoke, not joked, not commented casually. Whispered. I didn't realize it until later, but I whispered back. Almost out. That's the thing about that bridge. It pulls your voice down, makes you feel like something is listening. We reached the halfway point when it happened. A scream, a child's scream, high-pitched, desperate, echoing from beneath the bridge like someone was trapped under the floorboards. It was a sound so sharp, so sudden, I slammed the brakes without thinking. Emily grabbed the dashboard. "What the hell was that?" But I couldn't answer, because the scream wasn't fading. It wasn't distant. It was building, growing louder, and it wasn't just one scream, it was several. Layered over each other. Children, maybe 4, maybe 6, all of them screaming for help, screaming in pain, screaming like they were drowning. Emily was already crying, "Drive, please, please don't stop." But I couldn't move. The sound had frozen me, held me in place. Teeth chattering cold spread through my skull, down my spine, into my fingers wrapped around the steering wheel. The screams shifted suddenly from agony to something worse. Laughter. Not happy laughter. Mocking. Choked. Gurgling. Like children laughing with throats full of water. That snapped whatever trance I was in. I slammed my foot on the gas. The car lurched forward. Emily sobbed into her hands as we shot out of the bridge and tore down the road like something was chasing us. My hands shook for the entire drive. Neither of us spoke until I pulled into her driveway. Before she got out, she looked at me, mascara running down her cheeks. "You didn't imagine that, right?" I shook my head. "No, I heard it too." She hesitated before whispering, They weren't screaming for help. They were screaming at us. My blood went cold. That night I couldn't sleep. The screams replayed in my head, looping like a broken recording. I tried convincing myself it was acoustics, teenagers playing a prank, something rational. But the next morning, I talked to my neighbor, Mr. Graff in his 70s, born and raised here. When I mentioned the scream, he didn't ask what it sounded like. He didn't ask for details. He just went pale and muttered, "You stopped, didn't you? Nobody told you not to stop?" He looked terrified, real, bone-deep fear. He told me to follow him to his shed. Inside, he kept a stack of yellowed newspapers wrapped in twine. He found the one he wanted without hesitation and handed it to me. Lancaster County tragedy. 8 children die in covered bridge collapse. June 1968. I scanned the article with shaking fingers. A group of children were walking home from a Sunday picnic when one side of the bridge gave way. They fell through rotten planks into the river below. Several were trapped under debris. They drowned before rescuers reached them. I frowned. But the bridge didn't collapse. It's still standing. He nodded slowly. That's the new one. They rebuilt it. But the water didn't give their bodies back right away. It took days. Some took weeks. My father told me the river never ran quiet after that. I swallowed hard. And the screaming? He looked at me with a hollow expression. They scream at anyone who stops. They scream because it's too late. They scream because they want company. I didn't want to believe him. Old ghost stories, that's all. But the fear in his eyes wasn't the kind people fake. That night, I made the stupidest decision of my life. I went back, not out of bravery, because fear makes people do irrational things. I needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind. Needed to know if what I heard was real. I waited until midnight. The road was even more deserted than before. When I reached the bridge, I turned off the radio, rolled my windows up, locked my doors, and crept forward. Inside, the air was frigid again. My breath fogged instantly. The silence was thick, suffocating. I reached the middle and kept driving until the screaming began again. This time it was quieter, not distant, directly beneath me. I pressed the accelerator harder, and the screams rose sharply, angrily. Then came pounding, fists slamming against wood, thud, 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 dozens of them, in chaotic rhythm. Something slammed the underside of my car so hard the whole chassis shook. I yelped, swerving into the side rail, scraping the door. I could hear nails dragging on metal underneath me, like hands clawing upward. I floored the gas, but the car didn't move forward. It jerked, jolted, like something was pulling it backward. The engine whined, the wheels spun, but the car refused to move. "Go! Go, go!" I screamed. The bridge echoed my own voice back at me. "Go, go, go!" followed by childish giggles. Then everything stopped. No screaming, no pounding, just silence. The car shot forward so fast I nearly lost control. I didn't stop driving until I reached the next town over. I pulled into the first gas station and scrambled out of the car. The attendant noticed the scratches on the undercarriage immediately. "What'd you hit? A bear?" I shook my head, but when I knelt to look, my stomach twisted. Tiny handprints, blackened, soaked into the metal like soot, clung to the frame. Dozens of them, each no bigger than a child's palm. The attendant took one look and backed away. That night, I told Emily everything. She cried the entire time and refused to ever drive that road again. I didn't blame her. I avoided it too, for months. Until 2 weeks ago. I woke up at 3:21 a.m. to a noise under my bedroom floor. A muffled scream, short, sharp, unmistakably a child's voice. Then another, and another, then pounding. Small fists, desperate, frantic, coming from beneath the house. I jumped out of bed and backed into the hallway. It stopped instantly. But the next night, it came back. And last night was worse. I heard whispering. Not screams, not pounding, whispering. From the closet, from under the bed, from the vents. A chorus of soft, wet voices chanting one single sentence. "You stopped for us." I haven't slept since. And just now, as I'm writing this, I heard a sound behind me, a light splash, like water dripping onto the carpet. I turned around slowly. There are wet footprints on my floor, small, bare, leading from the hallway to the foot of my bed, and I can hear breathing, right behind me. I never believed my father's old saying that the woods in Pennsylvania hold on to people differently. I always thought he was talking about hunters who got lost, hikers who ignored trail markers, the usual small-town warnings parents give their kids to keep them cautious. But after what happened to my uncle, and what happened to me last winter, I understand exactly what he meant. My Uncle Mark went missing in 2017. He was an experienced hunter, the type who could walk a mile into the trees and come back with full confidence in where he'd been. He hunted the state forests around Clarion every year. But one afternoon he radioed in to say he'd spotted a strange cabin deep in the woods, a cabin that shouldn't have been there. It wasn't on any map. Nobody in our family had ever heard him mention it before. Within an hour, his radio went silent. Search teams found nothing. No body, no tracks, no signs of struggle. Just his abandoned ATV and a trail that went cold after 30 feet. Some people said he wandered off and fell into a ravine. Others whispered about poachers. But my father didn't buy any of it. He found something, Dad insisted. He found that cabin, and it found him. His words stuck with me, even years later. I never stopped wondering what my uncle saw out there. So when I moved back home last year to help care for my dad after his surgery, I decided to visit the woods myself. Not to solve anything, just to clear my head. But sometimes the woods decide when you learn the truth, not you. It was late November, right between hunting seasons. The forest was quiet, too quiet for the time of year. I hiked for hours, following old animal trails, letting the crunch of leaves under my boots and the cold bite of the air distract me from everything. For a while, it worked. But just past 3 p.m., something strange started happening. My phone vibrated. It was a voicemail notification. The number was listed as unknown. The timestamp said it was left just 2 minutes earlier, at 3:01 p.m. I had no cell service at all. Curiosity got the better of me. I pressed play. Static poured through the speaker, interrupted by a faint, rhythmic tapping. Then, through the distortion, a voice emerged, low, shaking, almost whispered. "I found a cabin. There's someone else living inside." The message cut off sharply, followed by a harsh scraping noise. I stopped walking. My throat tightened. The voice was familiar, too familiar. I replayed the voicemail twice. It was my uncle, no question, his exact tone, his exact way of pausing mid-sentence, a voice I hadn't heard since the year before he vanished. My hand trembled so hard I nearly dropped the phone. I looked around. The trees were silent. Nothing moved. The air felt colder, heavier, like the whole forest had changed the moment I heard that message. And then, off to my right, maybe 50 yards away, something broke a branch. A clean, sharp crack. Not an animal, not wind, something heavier, something walking. The hairs on my neck rose. My instinct screamed at me to leave. But the sound didn't repeat. The woods remained eerily still. That's when I saw it. Through the trees, half hidden behind dense pines, stood a cabin. Old, leaning to one side, roof sagging, smoke rising faintly from the chimney, even though the snow around it was untouched, like someone was inside, keeping warm. My heart pounded so violently I thought it might crack my ribs. Was this it? The cabin my uncle mentioned in his final radio call? The one nobody could find? I got closer. Not because I was brave, but because something about the place pulled me toward it, like gravity, like instinct, like I had been there before in a dream. The snow near the front porch was odd, not melted, not disturbed, just wrong, piled too evenly, too smooth. I climbed the 3 creaking steps. The front door was slightly open, swaying with the softest creak that scraped against my nerves. Inside, the air was warm, much too warm. The interior was dim, lit only by a small lantern on a crooked table. A fire crackled quietly in the stone hearth, sending shadows dancing across the walls. The place smelled like damp wood and old pine needles. "Hello?" I called gently. "Is anyone here?" Silence. But then something caught my eye. Boot prints near the far corner of the room. Large, heavy, familiar tread. My uncle wore boots like that. My breath caught in my throat. "Uncle Mark?" I whispered, feeling stupid for even saying it. No answer. I moved toward the prints, careful not to step on them. They led to the back room, a small bedroom with a broken bed frame and a shattered window. The breeze pushed the curtain in and out slowly like a breathing lung. The footprints stopped beside the bed. Then, there were drag marks. Something had been pulled out the back window. Or someone. My stomach flipped. I stepped closer, leaning down, inspecting the marks. They weren't deep, but they were unmistakable. I pushed the curtain aside, looked out into the forest, and a voice rasped right behind me. "Why did you come back?" I spun around. The room was empty. The voice hadn't come from outside, it came from inside the house, near the main room. My heart jumped into my throat. I moved silently toward the doorway, every muscle shaking. In the glow of the tiny lantern, a figure now stood near the fireplace. A man, tall, shoulders slumped, clothes dirty and shredded, back facing me. "Uncle," I whispered. He turned around slowly. It was my uncle's face, or something wearing it. The skin was pale and slack, pulled too tightly around the cheekbones. His eyes were sunken but wide, like he hadn't blinked in days. His mouth hung slightly open as if it was learning how to move again. But the worst part was his voice when he spoke. It didn't fit inside him, like it came from deeper underground. "You shouldn't have come here." My knees locked. Fear crawled through my ribs like ice. "I got your voicemail," I stammered. "You said someone was living in this cabin. Are you trapped? Hurt?" His expression didn't change, just empty, emotionless. "I'm not the one who left that message." The room tilted. My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" He stepped forward stiffly, like his joints didn't bend correctly. His boots dragged across the floor. "You need to go, before it knows you're here." "What knows I'm here?" I asked, backing up toward the door. He stopped walking. His head twitched violently to the side, like something inside him was trying to correct its posture. "It listens through the walls," he whispered. "It waits in the roots. It wears us like coats." A chill ripped through me. I remembered my father's words. I remembered story 1. But this wasn't the same thing. This was older, quieter, patient in a different way. I swallowed hard. "Uncle Mark, are you still you?" He blinked. Once, slowly. For a moment, something familiar flickered in his eyes. "Run," he whispered, "while you still have your voice." Before I could speak, the floorboards behind him bulged upward. The wood split open with a crack. Something pushed through, a thin, skeletal hand with long, knotted fingers. Roots, bones, both. The hand curled around my uncle's ankle. He didn't struggle, he didn't scream, he just sighed. It found me again. Another hand erupted from the floor, then another. They twisted around his legs, pulling him down. His skin stretched unnaturally as the hands tightened. I backed up fast, tripping over a chair and slamming into the wall. "No! Stop!" He didn't look at me, didn't reach for help. He only said, "Don't listen to it. Don't answer if it calls your name." His body jerked violently as the floor swallowed him inch by inch. First the legs, then the hips, then the chest. His face remained above the floor long enough to look directly into my eyes. That message wasn't me. His face sank into the dark. The cabin shook. Something huge shifted beneath the floor. A deep, resonant creaking like a tree bending in a storm, but there was no wind. I sprinted for the door. The house groaned. The walls shuddered. A voice, deep, layered, like multiple people speaking at once, rose from the floorboards. "Stay." I threw myself out the door into the snow. I ran blindly, slipping, scrambling, my lungs burning, every shadow vibrating with the memory of that voice. By the time I reached my truck, my fingers were numb and the sky had turned dark. I didn't look back. Not once. The drive home was a blur of panic and adrenaline. When I checked my phone again, the voicemail had disappeared. No trace, not even in deleted messages. But something new was there. A recording. One I didn't take. It was 11 seconds long. When I played it, I heard myself panting, running, clearly fleeing the cabin. Behind my breathing, something else whispered, "Found you." My dad won't talk about it. Emily refuses to stay at my house overnight. Even my dog won't go near the woods behind our property anymore. Last night, I woke up at 3:17 a.m. to my phone buzzing. A new voicemail. From unknown. I haven't listened to it yet, because the voicemail icon is flashing with a timestamp that matches the exact moment I woke up. The woods still hold on to people, and I think it's learning how to hold on to me. There's an old church on the outskirts of Eerie that people pretend doesn't exist. Not out of superstition, not out of fear, but because acknowledging it means acknowledging the thing that lives beneath it. The place was abandoned long before I was born, condemned after a basement flooding incident in the late 80s. After the pastor vanished, they locked the doors and left it to rot. It sits at the end of a gravel road, surrounded by trees that grow too close together, their branches tangled like fingers interlocking over secrets. I knew about the church long before I ever visited it. Everyone local knows the same basic rules. The basement light turns on at 3:14 a.m. If you see it, don't stare too long. If you hear humming, don't get any closer. And don't, under any circumstances, answer her. My father used to tell me this whenever we drove past its overgrown entrance. He never explained who her was. He'd just grip the steering wheel and mutter something about the lullaby lady. I always thought it was just a story he used to keep me from sneaking out at night. I believed that until the night I saw the light for myself. I was 24 at the time, working the overnight shift at a parts warehouse. My drive home took me past the church's forgotten road. Usually I kept my eyes on the asphalt, never glancing in its direction. But one night, near the dead center of winter, the sky was so clear and the moon so bright that the trees cast long, arrow-straight shadows across the ground. And through those shadows, just barely visible through the overgrowth, I saw it. A faint yellow glow in one of the basement windows. I hit the brakes without thinking. My whole body froze. I don't know why. I had driven past that road 10,000 times, always without looking. But that night, something tugged my attention like a string hooked behind my ribs. The light didn't flicker, it didn't pulse, it just stayed on, warm, still, wrong. I rolled down the window, and I heard it, a soft humming, a woman's voice, humming a lullaby I didn't recognize, slow and sad like someone singing to a baby who was already gone. My skin crawled. I should have driven away. I should have listened to every warning my father ever gave me. But curiosity is a dangerous thing, especially when it whispers that you're the only one who might finally uncover the truth. I pulled onto the gravel road and crept forward. The headlights carved through the trees until the church came into view. It looked worse than I remembered. The steeple was cracked. The front doors were boarded shut. The roof sagged under decades of rot. But the basement window on the right side glowed softly, warm as candlelight. The humming grew clearer. It was absolutely coming from below ground. And then, I swear to God, it harmonized. Two voices now. One soft and sweet, one deeper, older, off-key, like someone trying to copy her. I got out of the car. The cold hit me like a wall, biting straight through my coat. The snow crunched loudly under my boots. The church's front door was covered in signs, condemned, danger, restricted. But the basement window had no boards, no warnings. As I got closer, the humming stopped abruptly. Then a new sound emerged, the sound of small, deliberate footsteps pacing the basement floor, slow, barefoot, the kind of sound you hear when someone is walking on cold concrete. I crouched next to the window and wiped frost from the glass. That's when something moved inside. Not a person, a shadow, tall, thin, elongated beyond normal proportions, as if the basement lights stretched it like soft clay. The figure stepped into the warm yellow glow, and although I couldn't see its face, I could see its body clearly. Wrong, too long, joints bending subtly in directions human joints shouldn't bend. My breath fogged the glass. The thing stopped moving. Then its head turned toward me, not suddenly, not snapping, slowly, like it already knew my exact position hours before I arrived. I fell backward into the snow. The basement light flickered for the first time, once, then steadied again, and the humming started anew. Only one voice this time, higher, closer to the window, too close. I scrambled to my car, slipped on the ice, tore a gash in my palm, got up, and dove into the driver's seat. When I locked the doors, the humming stopped instantly, as if cut off mid-breath. I sped out of there, heart pounding so hard it blurred my vision. When I got home, my father was waiting on the porch, shivering in the cold. When he saw the state I was in, pale, shaking, bleeding, his face went white. "You looked at her," he said. It wasn't a question. I swallowed hard. "What was that thing, Dad? What's in that church?" He rubbed his hands together, staring into the darkness behind me. "They built over something. That's what my father always said. Something older than the church, older than the town, a well or a tunnel or a pit. It depends on who tells it." He looked at me with the most terrified expression I have ever seen on his face. "But it calls itself Mother." My blood ran cold. "How do you know that?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he went inside and returned with an old cassette tape. The label was smeared but still readable. June 12th, 1988, basement, 3:14 a.m. My stomach dropped. He put the tape into an ancient recorder and hit play. Static hissed for a long moment. Then a man's shaky breathing filled the speaker. Then footsteps. Someone walking slowly down a stairwell. Then, A woman's voice, soft, sweet, humming the same lullaby I'd heard, followed by a whisper, "Come closer, child." My father stopped the tape. "That was the pastor," he murmured. "He went down there every night for months, claiming he heard a baby crying. He said a mother was calling for help from the basement. When he stopped coming back up, they boarded the place." I stared at him. "Dad, that thing I saw wasn't a woman." "No," he whispered. "It hasn't been a woman for a very long time." That night I barely slept. Every sound in the house felt too loud, too close. At 3:14 a.m. exactly, my phone buzzed. A new voicemail. No caller ID. Hands trembling, I put it on speaker. A soft, warm humming filled the room. The same lullaby. And under it, much quieter, another voice whispered, "You shouldn't have left. I wasn't finished singing." I dropped the phone and stepped away like it had burned me. The voicemail deleted itself a few seconds later. In the morning, I drove back to the church, desperate to prove to myself that I imagined everything. But when I reached the gravel road, something stopped me cold. Fresh footprints in the snow. Small, bare, leading from the church's basement window straight toward the road, straight toward where I had parked the night before. There were no footprints leading back, just a trail that ended where my car had been. That night, the humming followed me home again. Not from my phone, not from outside, from underneath the floorboards. Soft, gentle, patient, as if someone were rocking a cradle under my house, as if the lullaby was meant for me. When I pressed my ear to the hardwood floor, the humming stopped. I heard breathing instead, slow, wet, too close. And then, just before I jerked away, a voice whispered from the darkness under my feet, "Open the door, child." I don't sleep at night anymore. I wait, I listen. Because no matter where I hide in the house, no matter how loud I turn the TV, no matter how many lights I keep on, at 3:14 a.m. on the dot, she sings. When I was 16, my school took us to a fall festival in a rural Pennsylvania town about 40 minutes from home. It was the kind of place where farmlands stretched for miles, the roads were lined with wooden signs pointing toward orchards, and everyone seemed to know each other by name. The main attraction that year was a massive corn maze grown on the edge of an old farm. 13 feet tall in some spots, twisting paths, dead ends, little bridges, and rumor had it the farmer designed a new layout every year so nobody could memorize it. But what everyone really talked about wasn't the size or the difficulty. It was the boy. People claimed that every year for 3 years straight, several guests reported seeing a young boy standing perfectly still deep inside the maze. He never talked, never reacted, never moved, even when approached. He just stared blankly, hands at his sides, eyes wide like a doll's. Staff always went in afterward, but no boy was ever found. Rumors spread that he died years earlier and wandered the maze each fall looking for a way out. Nobody took it seriously, obviously, not until the year I met him myself. I wasn't the kind of kid who believed ghost stories, but I was the kind of kid who went along with dares. So when my friends challenged me to go through the maze alone, I agreed without thinking. I lined up at the entrance as the sun dipped low behind the trees, turning the sky a deep, burnt orange. The maze swallowed sound the moment I stepped in. The noise from the festival, the music, the chatter, the tractor rides, all became muffled, like I was walking underwater. The corn towered over me, dry and brittle, swaying slightly in a breeze I couldn't feel. I followed the paths confidently at first. The ground was packed dirt, smooth, clearly walked by thousands already. Once I reached the first fork, I took the left path just to be bold. The stalks rustled softly as I brushed past. It was peaceful, almost soothing. About 10 minutes in, I started noticing something strange. I hadn't seen a single person. No kids running around, no annoyed parents, no staff hiding behind corners like they sometimes did for fun. Just me and the corn. The silence felt heavier the deeper I went. I reached a small wooden bridge that crossed over one of the paths. The boards creaked under my weight, echoing through the maze like footsteps too close behind me. From the top of the bridge, I could see over some of the stalks. Just an ocean of corn stretching endlessly, the pathways weaving and twisting like veins. I looked for movement, shadows, anything, but nothing stirred. I climbed down the other side and followed a long, narrow hallway of corn. That's where I saw him, standing perfectly still at the far end of the path, a boy. maybe 9 or 10 years old, pale skin, dark hair, wearing an old-fashioned white shirt that looked like it belonged to a Mennonite kid or something. His face was blank, expressionless. His hands dangled loosely at his sides. At first I thought he was a mannequin. His posture was too rigid, too deliberate. But when I took a step closer, his eyes shifted. Not his head, not his body, just his eyes. They moved like they were locked into place until the last possible second, then snapped to me in a quick, unnatural swivel. My stomach clenched. "Hey," I called out, my voice cracking slightly. "Are you lost?" No answer. I walked a little closer. He didn't react, didn't blink. "Are you okay?" I asked. He tilted his head a fraction of an inch, so slightly I almost didn't notice. Then his mouth opened, not wide, not enough to speak, just open, like a doll whose jaw had been pulled slightly out of place. Something about it made my whole body tense. I took another step forward. His head jerked, sharp, fast, like a glitch. His jaw opened wider suddenly, too wide for a normal movement. His neck cracked with the motion. A faint breath escaped his mouth, barely audible, a soft, rasping inhale. I stumbled backward. His body didn't move at all, not a twitch, not a breath. Only his eyes followed me, tracking me perfectly like two magnets locked onto metal. I turned and ran. The path forked. I didn't care which way, I just bolted. My heart pounded violently in my chest. As I sprinted, the corn around me somehow seemed taller, thicker, the path narrowing, the sky above dimming as if the sun had dropped faster than normal. I slowed only when my lungs burned. I leaned against a wooden post marking a dead end. I forced myself to breathe. Then I heard it. Footsteps, soft, shuffling, too light to be an adult, too irregular to be a calm walk. More like a crawl, a quick scraping drag across the dirt, then another, getting closer. I backed away slowly, hands shaking uncontrollably. The sound grew louder, scrape drag, scrape drag, scrape drag, until a shadow fell across the path. I turned around slowly. He was there. Crouched low on all fours, his head twisted at an impossible angle, facing upward though his body pointed downward. His arms bent the wrong way, elbows jutting out like broken wings. His fingers were spread wide, flat against the ground like a spider preparing to leap. His mouth hung open, too wide now, stretched unnaturally past the edges of his cheeks. His chest heaved in tiny, rapid breaths, but no sound came out. Not until his leg twitched violently and he jerked an inch closer. A deep, wet clicking sound rattled in his throat, like something was shaking loose inside him. I turned and ran again. Every few seconds the clicking grew louder behind me, faster. I didn't dare look back. The maze blurred around me. My legs burned. The air felt too thick. Paths twisted and turned, but none looked familiar. Then I heard giggling, childish giggling. Dozens of voices, all around me, high-pitched, echoing from between the stalks, as if the corn itself was laughing. "Stop," I whispered, though I didn't know who I was talking to. The giggling stopped immediately. Then, every stalk around me went silent. No wind, no rustling, just dead, suffocating quiet. I took one shaky step forward and froze. A small hand stuck out from between the corn rows, inches from my leg, pale, dirty, shaking slightly like it was reaching for help. I stumbled back. Another hand appeared on my left, then another behind me. A chorus of tiny fingers reaching through the corn like the maze itself had grown limbs. Then the humming started, low at first, like a child trying to hum a tune but forgetting half the notes. Then higher, louder, more frantic. Several voices humming at once, overlapping chaotically. My vision blurred with panic. I sprinted blindly toward the direction I hoped was the exit. My shoulders slammed into stalks, leaves cut my skin. My breath came in sharp gasps, my legs felt like jelly. The humming grew louder, then suddenly stopped. A moment of absolute silence, then a single whisper, inches behind my ear, "Wrong way." I screamed and stumbled through another turn. Then I saw it, the exit, the orange safety lights, the wooden arch, people milling around outside. I threw myself out of the maze, collapsing onto the grass. A staff member ran over, asking if I needed help, but I couldn't even talk. I just gulped air like I'd been drowning. When I finally gained control of my voice, I whispered, "There's something in there." He didn't look surprised, not even a little. He knelt beside me and lowered his voice. "You saw him, didn't you?" I stared at him, trembling. "The boy," I nodded. He sighed heavily, glancing back at the maze. "He's been showing up for years. We've combed that field 100 times. During planting, during harvest, no bodies, no animals, nothing. but people still see him." He paused, "And he's getting braver." I swallowed hard. That night I woke gasping, heart pounding. My window was slightly open, just an inch. I knew I'd closed it before bed. The wind rustled the curtains gently, then I froze. On the windowsill, pressed into the dust, were tiny handprints, small, child-sized, fingers splayed, as if someone had pulled themselves up to look inside. I closed the window and shut the curtains. I didn't sleep at all. The next morning, I found bits of dry corn husk on the floor near my bed. Not much, just a few flakes, but enough to tell me the boy didn't stay in the maze. Enough to tell me he knew where I lived, and that night, around 3 a.m., I heard rustling outside my window. Slow, dragging, like someone moving through corn that wasn't there. Then, 3 soft taps on the glass, tap, 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 and a child's voice whispered from the other side of the curtain, "Found you." When you grow up in rural Pennsylvania, you get used to seeing police everywhere. Small towns don't have much going on, so the sight of a cruiser rolling down a 2-lane road becomes background noise. But there was one patrol car people whispered about, one that didn't belong to any station, one with no unit number, no license plate, and no officer whose face you could clearly remember afterward. Locals called it the empty cruiser. I always thought it was a stupid ghost story, something teenagers invented to freak each other out on long drives. I laughed it off every time it came up. But after what happened last fall, I don't laugh anymore. Because whatever that cruiser is, whatever sits behind the wheel, it isn't human. I was driving home from a late shift at the hardware store on a foggy October night. The kind of fog that clings low to the road and makes your headlights feel useless. I live about 20 minutes from town, so the back roads are second nature to me. Quiet, empty, predictable. But that night, halfway down Route 6, I saw flashing red and blue lights in my rearview mirror. I eased off the gas. The cruiser behind me had no visible number above the windshield, no department name on the side, just a matte black surface where there should have been decals. The headlights were dim, almost the wrong color, more yellow than white, old, outdated, and yet the car moved smoothly, too smoothly for something that looked so worn down. I pulled onto the shoulder. The cruiser stopped directly behind me, lights spinning silently in the fog. I rolled down my window, hands gripping the steering wheel. My heart pounded harder than it should have. I'd done nothing wrong. My inspection was valid. My speed was fine. But something felt off. The officer didn't approach the window immediately. I heard the cruiser door open, slowly, then soft, deliberate footsteps on the gravel. But the steps were uneven, too slow, too heavy, like each foot weighed more than it should. A shadow appeared beside my car, long, thin, wrong. When the officer finally bent down to my window, something inside my chest squeezed so tight I stopped breathing. He was wearing a uniform, but not a modern one. The shirt was faded, almost gray instead of blue. The badge was tarnished. The name tag was scratched to the point of being unreadable. And his face, it didn't look right. His skin looked pale and flat, almost like plastic. His eyes were glassy, unfocused, reflecting the passing lights like marbles. His mouth moved stiffly, as if remembering how to form words. License and registration. His voice sounded thick, slurred, like it was being forced out of a throat that wasn't built to speak. I handed him my documents with shaking hands. He took them without looking at me. His fingers felt ice cold when they brushed mine, colder than the night air, too cold for a living person. He stared straight ahead while holding my papers, not down at them, not reading anything, just staring into the darkness across the road. Minutes passed. My nerves rattled. Finally, he handed my license back. "You may proceed." But he didn't sound confident or official. He sounded like he was imitating authority, not embodying it, like a child repeating instructions, like someone pretending to be human. I managed a weak, "Thank you, officer," but he didn't respond. He straightened slowly, too slowly, his spine cracking audibly in the process. He walked back to the cruiser, boots scraping the gravel. He got inside without glancing back at me, but the interior light revealed something that lodged in my brain like a splinter. The cruiser was empty except for him. No radio, no laptop, no cage divider. Just a bare interior and a darkness so deep behind him it felt like an open void. The door shut, the lights went off, and the cruiser drove away without making a sound. I sat frozen for several minutes. When I finally pulled back onto the road, I drove straight home and didn't sleep well for days. I tried telling myself it was a tired officer, bad lighting, my imagination. But each time I replayed the moment in my head, I remembered that unnatural cold, that plastic skin, that wrong stare. I thought the story ended there. I wish it had. 2 weeks later, I checked my mailbox and found a plain white envelope with no return address. Inside was a police citation for speeding, time-stamped the night I saw the cruiser, except the citation paper was outdated by at least 15 years. The design, the ink, the layout. Half the writing was smudged, the officer's signature was unreadable, and the patrol car number field was left blank. I called the local police department to question it. The woman on the phone paused for a long moment before saying softly, "We haven't had patrols on that stretch of Route 6 for over a month. Staff shortage. No cruiser was out there that night." My stomach twisted. What about a black cruiser without markings? Maybe a backup unit? Another pause. "No," she said firmly. "We don't have cruisers like that. None of the neighboring towns do either." I asked if someone else might have pulled me over. She hesitated again, choosing her words carefully. "You should bring that citation in. We need to check something." Her tone unsettled me. I hung up without agreeing. That night, around 12:40 a.m., I woke to flashing red and blue lights outside my bedroom window. The same lights, the same colors, but they weren't rotating normally. They flickered erratically, too slow, too uneven. I pulled the curtain back. A black cruiser sat in my driveway, lights spinning silently. No engine noise. No movement inside, just the car sitting there, pointed directly at my house. I backed away from the window slowly. My breathing grew shallow. My thoughts spiraled. After 10 minutes, the lights stopped. The cruiser reversed slowly, much slower than any normal vehicle, and disappeared down the road, swallowed by fog. I almost convinced myself it wasn't real, until the next morning, when I found something on my porch. My license, the same one the officer had handed back to me that night on Route 6. But the plastic felt warm, almost pulsing, like it had been inside a body. I threw it away and got a new one the next day. I should have left town then, but fear makes you freeze, not flee. What finally broke me was the night I checked my dashcam footage. The camera had been running during the original traffic stop. I had avoided reviewing it out of dread, but curiosity pushed me. I pressed play. There I was, pulling over, the cruiser behind me, the flashing lights. The officer approached, but on the playback, he didn't look human, not even close. His arms were too long, his legs bent wrong, his head jerked in unnatural movements as he leaned into my window, and his eyes, they glowed. Not bright, not like an animal, just faint, white, hollow. And when he opened his mouth to speak, it stretched open farther than it should have, like the hinge was unrestrained. But the worst part? The dash cam picked up something I didn't hear that night, whispering. Dozens of voices speaking under his words, layered, wet, gurgling, repeating one phrase over and over, "Found you." I slammed my laptop shut so hard the screen cracked. Now every night around 1 a.m., I hear a car idling outside my house, not passing by, not slowing down, idling, soft, low, persistent. Sometimes it lasts a few minutes, sometimes over an hour, and last night I heard a door open, slow, heavy footsteps on my driveway, gravel shifting, then the faintest knock on my front door. Polite, quiet, wrong. When I looked through the peephole, there was no one there. But parked in front of my house, half hidden by fog, was a black cruiser. No markings, lights off, just waiting. I don't know what it wants. I don't know why it chose me. I don't know what sits behind the wheel. But I know this, when the lights start flashing again, and the officer knocks a second time, I won't open the door.